All the engines on the island of Sodor enjoyed Luke's first day on the island of Sodor because Luke did really well with Molly, because both Molly, Hero and Peter Sam think how special and really useful Luke is, because he's a very, very useful engine on the railway. But some of the jealous engines, like Salty, Mike and Henry, doesn't think he's special at all, and it's because they don't know why they were feared. And it's because they don't know why about him, because they think he's a very stupid engine, and that is why they don't like him, because they think he's really stupid every day, because he's a very likable engine on the Sodor Railway every day. But one day on the island of Sodor, however, Hank was so cross, and it was because Spencer had been late and he had been blamed for nothing. So Hank steamed in so crossly. The engines want to talk to him, but he didn't want to. When Hank said this to the engines, "Hey," he said, "is the big black monster still here?" he said. But just then Molly was so shocked. "Hank," he said, "don't even think about saying that rude word to Luke. He's a very useful engine on the foundation. In the foundation of this railway," said Peter Sam. "Well, me being American engine will be the foundation of this railway," said Hank. "And oh, it's so cool," he said. "Not likely for the big black monster, of course. For the big black monster, of course," he said. But Hero was so shocked. "Stop calling him that," he said. "He's a double tender engine." "Who knows?" said Hank. He's a big black monster with two troublesome trucks. That doesn't make it a double tender engine." But just then Molly was so annoyed and said this to Hank. "Go, Hank," he said. "You're insulting our friend, and I don't want you to do this to him while he's here." "Oh," said Hank. "Yes, sir," and he puffed away. "Sorry that our Hank teased you, Luke," said Molly. "It's all right," said Luke, "because when I first came to my old railway, all the engines teased me too." "I don't know why you're like this," said Peter Sam, "because it doesn't matter." "Because it doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter." Oh, but just then Hero came up with a good idea. "I know," he said. "We'll play a trick on him tonight while he's asleep in the sheds." "Really?" said the engines. "Yes," said Hero, and he told them the entire plan for what they're going to do to Hank tonight, because this is going to make Hank so disappointed, while he is going to feel really ill and sick. Meanwhile, Hank took old Slowcoach to a siding and puffed away. And with that, Hank stormed angrily back to Knapford Sheds. Hank stormed angrily back to Knapford Sheds while Stepney and Emily were already there. "Oh," he said, "my day has been rough." "Has yours been rough?" he said. But Stepney was too tired to talk. You know, Hank," said Emily. You know it's rude to talk to engines while they are asleep. And as you know, Stepney's asleep, so already we must go to sleep, because we'll be having a busy day tomorrow, and you should know that by now." "Okay," said Hank, and Hank decided to go to bed too. While Hero was sneaking outside Knapford Sheds, he brought some workmen inside him and was ready to do something very tricky to Hank. Do it quickly and quietly, said Hero. We don't want to disturb him, don't we? And with that, the workmen continued on during the night. At morning time, when night time was over, Hank started to yawn, and his wheels were sore. Yawned Hank. I'm glad tomorrow is gone, but today's a brand new day. I can't wait to pull my train. When suddenly, Stepney and Emily were laughing about something. What is really happening to Hank? What's so funny, said Hank. There's nothing to laugh about. Oh, yes, there is, said Emily. Look at your tenders, said Stepney. I only have one tender. I only have one tender, said Hank, and Luke only has two, and you should know this by now. Stop teasing me. I'm very annoyed, he said. But Hank, it's true, said Stepney. You do have two tenders. You look funny, said Emily. But Hank was wrong. When he got out of the shed, he did have two tenders. Oh no, he said. What engine? Whoever did this to me, he said. And with that, he thought a little bit harder, and he knew what it was. He said, Hero, Peter, Sam, Molly, he said. I'm going to throttle them, he said, while he was puffing around the track. He seemed faster and faster, hoping no one would laugh at him. No one laughed at me, he said, but he was wrong. The jealous engines laughed at Hank while he had two tenders, but just then something came in. But just then something came into their gobs. It looks like we have another Luke in town, said Rosie, and they all laughed and laughed. Hank did not think that was funny at all, and he finally reached the yards. How could you guys do such a thing? How could you guys do such a thing to me? Asked Hank. Well, it's because we want to prove a point to you, said Peter Sam, so that you'll know how important Luke is, he said. By the way, said Hank, could you get this extra tender off me? I look ridiculous. Well, anyway, Hank, said Hero, my tender's gone, and it's because the workmen painted it orange, and it was the same size as your tender, and that was why I have no tender anymore. That is why I have no tender anymore, because the workmen were doing such a thing to it during the night, and that was why the Fat Controller gave me a day off, he said. Well, that's right, said Molly, and you should know what Luke is always like with you by now, Hank, said Peter Sam. But Hank didn't want to talk. He told his driver to get this extra tender off Hank, but it was no use. Sorry, Hank, said his driver. It still has a bolter on it, and we still can't get it out. Who even cares, said Hank. I just don't want anyone laughing at me. And he didn't. Just then the Fat Controller came in and spoke to Hank. The engines told him all about he and Luke, and the Fat Controller spoke to him. You know it's rude to be mean to a new engine like Luke, he said. Then I suggest you have to apologize to him. Well, why me? said Hank. Why won't the engines do so to me? He said. They played a trick on me last night. I know that. I know that, said the Fat Controller, and that was why Hero had no tender, because he wanted you to have an extra one. So that was why I gave him a day off. Now all of you, everybody, what can Hank do about everything what has to be sorted for himself? What can be wrong with you, Hank, he said, for being mean to Luke? Well, said Hank, I don't know why. The Fat Controller did not know what he was saying. Perhaps this will make you learn your lesson about that, said Peter Sam. Exactly, said Hank, and he did also learn his lesson indeed.